Hi, everybody. I'm Maria Dockery, and this is my husband, Richard. Say hello, Richard.
Hello.
We are launching our very first podcast, and this is something we've wanted to do for a long time. And we would like to just start out with a few things. We experience a lot of things. We own a ladies' gun store, by the way, if you don't already know that. And we have a lot of experiences with people, and a lot of people come in and talk to us and share their concerns and their fears. And this whole podcast series is going to be addressing people who aren't quite sure what to do, how to do, and really just kind of mold your thinking so that you're able to set your own goals, how to get started, and how to get better. So today we're going to be talking about how to get started with a concealed carry permit, common misconceptions of new shooters, and taking steps towards responsible firearm ownership, and that goes for all experience levels and not just the folks who are starting. We are actually going to have a few other, let me see what we've got here. It's going to be a little bumpy because this is the first time I've done this. So one of our goals of the series is going to be to reach more people to fight the anti-gun bias that seems to be growing. And the way we're going to fight this is to increase knowledge and education. And I think that a lot of times folks will come into our store and they'll talk to us and they don't really understand guns. And so it's only human nature for us to fear something that we don't understand. And I think that once we start talking to people, they start understanding, hey, this is how it can or cannot hurt me. And they start feeling a little empowered so that they're able to handle a firearm and maybe even go out and shoot it. Richard and I are pretty reliable people, and we're relatable people, and we tend to speak in beginner terms and not in a non-judgmental way. And we've reached thousands of women and men, and we've talked about everything that you wanted to know about guns, but we're afraid to ask. So with that, I just wanted to introduce Richard and let him talk a little bit on some of the I don't know. Do you have anything you'd like to add in our intro?
Yeah, I do. Because
sorry.
We're going to be putting a lot of information out there. And some of it's going to touch in the legal realm. Mm-hmm. And some of it's also going to touch on some things that are happening in the news. When it comes to the legal realm, we study this stuff all the time. We are not attorneys. No. We cannot speak with authority, let's say, on some of the legal aspects of it, but we do have a ton of knowledge about it. And we attend seminars on it. We even host seminars at the stores doing that. So when we do put out anything there that touches on the legal and you want to know more about it, you got a couple of avenues. One, there are definitely books out there available. We have them in the shop that actually take all the legalese surrounding the laws with firearms, which there's quite a bit of it, and puts it into English terms and gives you examples and gives you an easy way to understand it. Because if you look up the laws online, you got maybe 2 or 3 pages of them. It looks pretty straightforward, but when you read them, they kind of contradict each other. They kind of go in different directions. But the books that we carry definitely lay it out in a way that you're going to be able to understand it and stay safe within the limits of the law. Another way is talking with attorneys that specialize in gun laws. Not all attorneys do that. If you're interested in getting in touch with any or with having a seminar with one, come to the shop, talk to us about it. We can get you hooked up with the right people who really know what's going on, who specialize in defending as well as to some degree prosecuting. And we need to understand that not every lawyer has a full understanding of the gun laws. It's its own world. So again, if we touch on something, the books we have, come into the shop. We'll get you hooked up with the right lawyers to go deeper with it. But we're going to give you some guidelines as we go along, and the guidelines are fairly reliable with that caveat.
And I also want to say, too, that there's a lot of old stories out there or old ways of doing things. And sometimes those just aren't really accurate. And so you got to be careful of the source of your information, and you really want to make sure it's a reliable source. I know that, your grandfather's been shooting for 35 years, and he says that this has always been a rule or a law, and this is the best way to do something. And while his heart's in the right place, It may not be the best thing to do or the best way to do things. So we really want you to make sure that you have a reliable source of information so that you're doing things right and you're not standing at the range being that person. Nobody wants to be that person at the range. You can't believe it. They just did that. Oh my gosh, I'm going home. They scared the heck out of me. We hear those stories all the time. So you don't want to be that person. Nobody does. So let's just take a responsible approach to firearm ownership. And that's basically what we're going to do. It's common sense stuff. It is things that we have experienced firsthand. And we just kind of have we just hear a lot of stories. So we thought that it'd be kind of interesting, too, to be sharing those with you because sometimes we get some pretty funny stories. So anyway, I want to introduce myself as the woman that's kind of behind the Femme Fatale arms. I want to tell my story quickly here. Basically, a few years ago, this is how I got started. A few years ago, maybe more like 5 or 6, there were some issues in the area I live in, and there were actually some home invasions taking place. And these brazen criminals were actually coming through the sliding glass doors of the home while the homeowner's sitting there watching TV.
5 in 1 month.
But yeah, it was a lot. Mm-hmm. And I would text you each time that happened because Richard was traveling for business a lot at that time. And that concerned me. The kids had moved out, they'd grown up, moved out. So I'm alone in the house with a couple of little foofy dogs. They're not going to do me any good. Even if I had a big dog, that wouldn't have done me any good because big dogs need some backup too. So I decided, I said, Richard, I think I need a gun. And he said, well, go ahead and do it. And so me being the independent woman I am, like, well, I'm going to go buy myself a gun. I can get some information and do this on my own. Well, little did I know that I came up against a gun culture that really kind of looked down on women. They basically, one of the gun stores I went to, the guy walks up, he puts a .22 revolver on the counter, and he goes, lady, this is the gun for you. And I go, well, wait a minute. I really don't want a revolver, and can we talk about a semi-automatic? And the man was done talking to me, just gave me a look like, either buy it or leave kind of look. And I'm like, holy cow, okay, well, so I leave, and I try another gun store. And when I get to the next gun store, I'm talked to like I'm a little girl in pigtails. And the guy's talking to me like, oh, you want this, and this is for you. And it just, he wouldn't entertain any of my questions. And again, he's picking out the gun for me and assuming that was the best gun for me in my situation. Again, it didn't feel right to me, and it felt like he wasn't listening to me and wasn't interested. The third store that I went to actually wasn't interested. I'm standing at the counter, and there's a gentleman to my right, and the clerk is working with him, and that's fine. I'm waiting my turn. And as I'm standing there, another gentleman comes up to my left, and the clerk walks right by me and waits on the man to my left. And I'm thinking, well, maybe he was already at the counter once and just walked away to look at something, and he came back. I'm like, okay, I'll wait my turn again. Clerk finishes with the second man and again walks right by me to wait on a third man to my right, and just completely pretended like I wasn't even there. I'm like, holy cow, this guy really doesn't want to wait on me. And I'm like, this is really not good. So, of course, I left. And I went home and I told Richard, I said, I'm having an awful time. And he says, well, all right, when I get home, from his business trip, he says, I'll go with you. We go to another store and we go together, and the sales clerk refused to look at me, and he talked to Richard. And I'd ask a question and he'd answer Richard. And Richard would say, she's buying the gun. Look at her, answer her. And the guy continued to talk to Richard. And I'm like, see, this is what I'm up against. So again, I did not buy a gun. I was disappointed. I'm going to take my business elsewhere. And so I go home and I start thinking about this. And I'm like, this is nuts. Okay, this makes me angry. And when I get angry, I think about what can I do to change this? Because if I'm experiencing this problem, so are other women. And I see you out there right now, and you're shaking your heads, and you're going, absolutely, absolutely. I've been treated like that. I get it all the time. So I told Richard, I said, listen, I want to open a gun store, and I want this gun store to focus on women. We focus on women first. Well-behaved men are always welcome, but we really focus on explaining to women. We speak lady there. We make sure that women understand, and we answer their questions, and we don't make them feel foolish. So that is where our roots began. Richard has been my biggest supporter and cheerleader, and I certainly wouldn't be here without him and his support over these years. We've been in business for 5 years, and this brand new venture I'm really excited about talking with you and sharing our experiences and our knowledge with you. So what I'm going to do is we're going to be going to break for a little bit. I want you to know quickly that we also have sponsorship opportunities. And if you're interested in sponsoring a segment of our program or the whole program, please contact me at ladiesgunshow.com. You can go right through to our website, and I'll be happy to talk with you about sponsorship opportunities. And we will be right back after this break.
Hey, this is Trisha Schmalhofer, hostess of BAM, Badasses, Alchemists, and Mystics. This podcast is all about seeking knowledge, talking to experts, changing perspectives, channeling wisdom, and shifting consciousness. Listen as we invite a different badass guest each time from a variety of career fields who are living their purpose, spreading light, giving strength and hope, and changing lives every day. We stream live on Facebook, so like our page, interact with us, and watch the behind-the-scenes action. Find BAM, Badasses, Alchemists, and Mystics on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts under Space Coast Podcast Network. BAM!
Hey, it's Vinny with the Vinny Marino Podcast Show. I want you to join me Wednesday evenings as we tackle all the crazy headlines and uncover what's missing. Also, we will have exciting guests from our community who have seen it all and not afraid to spill the beans about it. And finally, we can't forget about Vinny's top rants and raves about traffic, restaurants, and events. Join us on Facebook as we go live and take you behind the scenes of each show and let you be a part of it. It's the Vinny Marino Podcast Show, raw, unedited talk all the time, straight to your dome. Live from the Space Coast Podcast Studios. Listen everywhere you find podcasts.
Hi there, we're back now, and we've talked a little bit about our goals and what we want to do. We want to empower and educate you, and now let's talk about your goals. We get a lot of people who come into the store, and they want to get their concealed carry permit. Actually, I was just reading an article. There are 24 million Americans who want to purchase their first firearm. So that's some pretty interesting information. So we need to reach those people. We need to talk to those people. If you're one of those people, when you select a place to purchase your first firearm, make sure you get somebody who's going to listen to you, who's going to hear your concerns, and actually not tell you what kind of gun you need. So, I mean, basically, you've got to choose your own gun. It's very similar to choosing your own shoes. Husbands out there, I think you guys are great. I think that your hearts are in the right place, but just because your wife wears a size 7 and you know she wears a size 7, would you ever dream of picking out a pair of shoes and bringing them home to her? No, because we need fit, okay? And through that fit, that's how we select a firearm that we love. So your goals, let's go back to goals. I got a little sidetracked there. And talking about getting your concealed carry license. So what we do is we discuss the gun laws. And what we want to do is make sure that you know that Florida is, for now, a shall issue state. And Richard's going to talk a little bit about shall issue and concealed carry permits in the state of Florida.
Okay, in Florida, it's actually pretty easy. Not as easy as some states. We're kind of in the middle. Florida is supportive of firearms rights and recognizes the Constitution to a degree. But there are also other states out there that really embrace the constitutional rights of its citizens. We have constitutional carry states. We have states that if you're a resident, you can carry a concealed weapon or an open weapon just by way of being a resident. We have some that have minimum qualification, and they kind of stick to the heart of what goes on with the Constitution and the Second Amendment. We also have states that extremely lock down what you can do, what you can carry, where you can carry. States, notorious states like New York, New Jersey, and a lot of the northeastern states, where they get to the point that it's very difficult to get a permit. Some of the tests required to get your permit are super hard, and they even restrict you to what gun that you can carry, and it has to be the one that you use to acquire your permit. You're not allowed to carry anything else. Florida kind of falls in the middle, where it's easy to get a permit if you pass certain standards. And once you get your permit, you pretty much can carry anything you want. In future podcasts, we're going to talk about everyday carry and what's good, what's not good, what you should be thinking about, and get into that whole thing. But in Florida, you have that flexibility. So in order to get your permit right out of the gate, a lot of people are confused because there's different approaches you can take. There's an approach I don't recommend, but which I see a lot of people doing, in which they'll jump into one of these 90-minute expedited classes where they fill out some paperwork, shoot a wax bullet in a barrel, call it done. They fill out all that paperwork, send it in, and about 90 days later, they get a notice back saying, hey, you misspelled something, send it back in. 90 days after that, you finally get your permit. The worst, slowest way you can do it, in my opinion, again, my opinion, but a lot of people share that. One of the best ways to do that is to get, first of all, a reputable training class. And by a reputable training class, we're going to talk about training methodology a little bit later after the break. But a reputable training class is one that's not only going to inform you about everything that you need to know as a responsible gun owner. It's going to touch upon the laws. It's going to touch upon things that you need to do to stay safe, both inside your home and outside your home. And it's also going to teach you to shoot. And that's where a lot of programs fall down. You need to actually get range time with real bullets, real targets, nothing simulated, nothing fake. You need to actually shoot a gun to understand how it works and how you can adapt yourself to using a gun. So you need a good solid course that's going to get all that stuff for you. And once you get out of that, you get a training certificate. Now, the training certificate meets your state requirements, if you took the right course, in order to get your concealed carry permit. But you're not done at that point. The fastest way after that to get it is to take that certificate, take your driver's license, and I believe it's $119 now, and go to one of the one-stop processing centers. Forget about the big packet of paperwork and going to Walgreens to get your picture and the police department for your fingerprints. There's one-stop processing centers set up by the sheriff's department that actually expedite this thing and get you your permit in your hand a lot faster. So when you go there, you make an appointment, you're going to be in and out in about 20 minutes. They're going to take your picture, they're going to take your fingerprints. Everything's done electronically so you know it's right when it goes out, and it gets sent out to the state at that point. Lately, they've been running about 3 weeks. If you're a military veteran, you get put to the front of the line. I've seen a turnaround on veterans in 3 days is the fastest I've seen. So anywhere between 3 days and 3 weeks right now. Other than that, if there's a big rush, because the political climate tends to feed the rush for permits and to get people feeling the need to get their permit, then it slows down. But it'll only slow down a maximum of 90 days. But right now, like I said, everybody's going in, they're getting them back in about 2-3 weeks. So it's pretty easy at that point. Once you have that permit, that's when you can start carrying concealed. Just because you send in the paperwork or got all that filed, don't consider that as having your permit or ready to go and start carrying where you actually have it on your person. You need to have it on your person at that point. Now, the good thing with that is it lasts for 7 years. There's some political movements going on, which I won't get into any detail now, that's trying to shorten that to 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. But right now,
they want you to retest too.
Yes.
Right now, once you've gotten into your concealed carry permit, you can renew it every 7 years, and there's some rustling around in the shadows there that they want to make that shorter.
Exactly. Right now, you take the old permit, you make an appointment, go into the one stop, you walk out of there 15 minutes later with your brand new permit, good for another 7 years for $75. It's awesome. This is Lisa Cullen's office has this set up.
Well,
and
that's
great.
That's what I wanted to tell you is basically you did mention that it's the sheriff's office that has these, and it's not. It's the tax collectors. So these are Florida state tax collectors, and Brevard County, I believe, has 4 of them. Titusville, Merritt Island, Vieira, and actually, that would be 3. And then we send people down to the Sebastian tax collector, and that's actually in Indian River County. But I do want you to know that it's not any tax collector's office that does this one-stop processing. It's only those specific ones because it requires specific equipment in order to process your concealed carry. It does make it very efficient. It's very easy and one-stop, meaning you walk in there with your certificate, $119 and a smile, and they take care of you. And I've had nothing but good reports about the experiences people have had when they've gone in to apply for their concealed carry permit. The other thing is, and Richard was talking about where you may get your training in order to get your concealed carry permit. And a lot of folks confuse the fact that they hold a concealed carry permit, that little card with your picture on it. They confuse that with being proficient with a firearm. And I can't tell you enough how that is so untrue. You are basically legal to carry a firearm in Florida. That doesn't mean that, it's in some ways it's not that great of an accomplishment.
Well, that doesn't mean you know what you're doing, and we're going to talk about that after the break. But it's a case of you have the legal ability to carry it. That doesn't mean that you know what you're doing with it or that you're even safe in what you're doing in your practices, because a lot of these classes don't get into that. And even the fact that former military can go in and get it with 0 training. I think that's great that they do that for the veterans.
Me too.
But there's one consideration that doesn't come into play is that when you're in the military, everybody has their job. It's their military occupational specialty, their MOS. And not every MOS will ever even touch a handgun throughout their entire time. You can go 20 years and not touch a handgun. However, the state will issue a permit based on the fact that you're a veteran. I think it's your due diligence to make sure that you know what you're doing with it, veteran or not. And I get a lot of veterans in my class. I even get former law enforcement, former military all the time in the class. It's important to make sure that you do know what you're doing, regardless of what you're allowed to do legally. You've got that responsibility on yourself and others around you.
I think that, and I don't have a problem at all with former military having the DD-214 and getting their concealed carry, because there is nobody out there more qualified and with the best of intentions being exercising their Second Amendment rights. And I just think that more people need to do that. And I do support people going out in whatever way they can, getting their concealed carry. But I do think that the path to responsible firearm ownership is taking more classes and really learning how to do it right, so that when you do need it and you do end up with that adrenaline dump, and oh my gosh, this bad guy's running at you, that you're actually able to defend yourself because you practiced enough, because you have the muscle memory, and you're going to fall back on what you practiced. And if you're not practicing with that gun, you're not going to do very well.
And that again, that's an area we're going to get into. One more thing on the laws. The laws are pretty good where they're at now. That don't mean they're going to stay there. One thing we're going to talk about kind of a Second Amendment watch and what's happening in that. We'll get into some things that are going on there. But keep in mind, if you don't keep an eye on what's going on with the laws, then your 7 years for your permit, the cost of it, the requirements for it, even your ability to carry or not carry could be greatly impacted by a lot of what's coming. There are a lot of bills out there now that are being reviewed that could extremely squash what you have now and put you into one of the categories that some of the states that have the harshest laws out there. So,
and we're going to talk about those more after we come back from this break.
Sounds good.
Are you in the market for a new home? Perhaps you need to sell your old home and downsize or relocate. Hey there, my name is Jesse Hall with eXp Realty, and I offer professional real estate services right here on the Space Coast. Give me a call, 321-877-8737 for all of your real estate needs. Again, 321-877-8737 for all of your real estate needs. Buy, sell, invest with the best. Find out more at 321-buysellinvest.com.
You're listening to Space Coast Podcast, home of the greatest podcasts on the Space Coast. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor or having your own show, email us at spacecoastpodcast@hotmail.com. Space Coast Podcast. Talk hard!
Hello, America. We are Ruthless Politics, Vladimir Putin's favorite podcast.
Hello, American podcast listeners. I am Vladimir Putin. I like this podcast. I like this guy Trees. Kid Groening, not so much.
Tune in every Tuesday for Ruthless Politics Podcast, live from Moscow. Just kidding, folks. Live from the Space Coast Podcast Studios in sunny Florida.
No, but for real, every Tuesday, check it out. And you could see it on the YouTube, the Facebook, and the Twitter and Instagram.
Welcome back, everybody. We started to touch upon the training thing in the last segment before the break. And especially, I want to circle back to something that was said that Maria had said about having your permit does not mean that you're competent. There are a lot of misconceptions around training, and I tend to get a little passionate around training because I think it's one of the most important aspects of firearms ownership. It's the only way you're going to be able to do what you need to do in the way you need to do it without hurting yourself or unintended people. One of the things that happens is people get the idea that they know what they're doing, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. We get something in the store, people will come in and we'll start discussing classes and firearms and that, and we'll get an attitude sometimes where I've been shooting for 20 years, I know what I'm doing, or I don't need a class, and I have my permit, I don't need classes, and of course I know how to shoot a gun. It's not rocket science. I get that a lot when people come into the store, and that's a dangerous concept, and that stems from when we look at it from a psychological perspective, and I like to go into the psychology and biology of training too, to help feed things, because it's how we work as human beings and how we learn and how we function. And that basically what people are saying falls right into a psychological concept called the Dunning-Kruger curve. Now, the Dunning-Kruger curve shows the balance of the way people think as far as their level of confidence and the amount of knowledge that they actually have. And what it's been shown is when somebody first gets into something, they'll think, all right, I don't know much about this. I'm going to take some training. I'm going to take a class, or somebody's going to teach me. And they get a little bit, and they feel good about it, and they build their confidence. And basically, they get the understanding or concept that that's all there is, and they know what they need to know, and it's good, and they're on top of this. As they start to learn more, their confidence starts to deteriorate. And the more you know, the more you realize that you don't know. And there's a whole world out there that you don't even realize exists that you really need to know to be good at what you do. And it's a curve that goes up sharp, and it says, hey, I'm on top of this, I'm the master. And then it drops down to, hey, I don't know anything. And then it starts to build up. And that's when your real learning occurs, when you realize that you know just enough to be dangerous, but you really don't know enough to be safe and effective. So that we get that in the store all the time, and it's just human nature. What I like to put an analogy out there that kind of explains that is, say you've got a 15-year-old, and he's going to be getting a car, and he's going to be learning how to drive, and he's been watching you. And he knows that, hey, the pedal on the right makes it go, the pedal on the left makes it stop, the steering wheel makes it turn, and that little thing in the middle makes it go forward or backwards. I know how to drive a car. Okay.
With confidence.
With confidence. They know what they're doing. They've seen this. So you get them in the driveway going back and forth a little bit, and they know they can make it go forward and back and stop in that, and now they got it. Now, this is the peak of your Dunning-Kruger curve. This is also the person who came out of a 90-minute expedited course with their permit, and they don't need a class because they know how to shoot. So what I call it is situational proficiency, and I don't even know if that's a real term. It's just one I use all the time.
It is now.
It is now, situational proficiency. And basically, that kid is proficient in the driveway. Your shooter, you stand him at the line. He is proficient at the line with putting holes in a silhouette target 15, 20 feet away, however far he's been practicing. And that's the level of proficiency. Take that same kid, put him on the highway, put him in traffic, put him where there's stoplights and things happening, everything breaks down. Same thing with the person who's standing at the line putting holes in silhouette targets. It's 10 o'clock at night. You're down in one of the gas stations down off of Babcock or University or something, and you're getting gas, and 3 guys approach you from behind the dumpster over there. All of a sudden, your knowledge of how to shoot a gun is gone. You can stand at the line and put holes in there, but you might not even remember you have a gun at that point. Never mind if you do remember being able to use it effectively. So now your situational proficiency is 0 at this point because you didn't do certain things in your training and practice that you really need to do. So, and this all comes down to the biology of how your mind works and how it learns. And I want to touch on it a little bit. A lot of times we refer to muscle memory, and that's really a bad term because your muscles don't have memory, and that's not how it works. The way it really works is there's different parts of your mind that operate in different ways and have different responsibilities. You have all your sensory stuff, which takes in everything. You have your analytical sections. You also have a section that controls your motor skills and what you do and the movements that you make. But in between that sensory and analytical stuff and the motor skills, you have what's called the basal ganglia. And basically what that is a part of the mind that will figure out what movements are necessary to accomplish a goal that's deemed necessary by the other parts of the mind. So you see stuff, you say, hey, I got to use my gun. All right, so the basal ganglia figures out all the things you need to do to use your gun, and then it passes it to the motor skills, and you pull your gun and you shoot your gun. Now, that's all well and good and works great at the range, but it's slow. And it's slow and it's unreliable because it's like reinventing a wheel every time you do it, every time you shoot your gun. So that's not a problem at the range. But what happens at the gas station at 10 o'clock at night is as soon as those people come around the corner, you get an adrenaline dump. Now, adrenaline messes you up in a whole lot of ways. But the most important way for what we're talking about is as soon as all that sensory information comes in and passes it to the part of the brain that says how to put the motor skills together, the adrenaline...
Your fight or flight.
It's fight or flight, and it shuts down that part of the brain. So now it can't figure out what it's doing. You become all fumbles. You can't use your gun. You can't do anything. And that's the danger that happens. So the way we need to train has to be a very prescribed methodology. And by that, I mean you need to do actions and methodologies in a way that align with how your brain works and how your mind works, and we focus a lot on those areas. And one of the most important things is once you get the right way to do it, it's the practicing of the right way to do it repeatedly to the point that it's beyond boring. It has to be constant over and over again, but it has to be the exact same way in the right way. Because what happens is when you do something repeatedly over and over again, that basal ganglia part of the brain doesn't have to do as much work because all the things you've already done are now recorded there. So when it starts to build what's called neural networks, so it's a neural adaptation where you're starting to hardwire your brain. So you're hardwiring your brain from the sensory and analytical parts to the motor skills. And the more you do that over and over again, the harder that becomes hardwired. And that's when it turns into a reaction and there's no thought involved. So when you're in the parking lot and you've done this over and over again, what happens is that hardwiring occurs. You see the threat. Your mind says, hey, I got to use my gun. Hardwired straight through to the motor skills. The gun comes out. You do what you need to do. Without that whole how do I do this getting involved with that part of your brain that's been shut down by the adrenaline.
So what are you doing with your training in order to get that ingrained in... I'm sorry, you're saying some terms that I don't really understand. But
okay.
Anyway...
Basically, what's necessary and what we do with our training is sets of steps that build on each other, that create an action that gets repeated reliably the same way over and over again. If you do it the same way over and over again, you build a network. If you vary, your network never builds, and it remains still having to figure it out
So
each time.
consistency in doing the same thing, make sure it's the right thing that you do, but
Right.
consistently doing the same thing so that without thinking, you're able to execute whatever it is you're trying to do.
Now, in doing that, the repetitions, the average person, anywhere from 300 to 500 repetitions will build a temporary muscle memory.
Yep.
or that neurological adaptation. So 300 to 500 gets you so you kind of know where everything's working and you kind of got that network built. The thing is, if you don't reinforce it, within 3 to 4 weeks, it goes away. It's now deteriorated, and you're starting from scratch at that point.
So it's kind of like learning to drive a car. So when you're first learning to drive a car, you really have to focus on using your directional. Where is it? Where's the volume knob for the music? Because we always like to listen to music when we're driving. But it's a major distraction. But as we've gone on over the years, because we drive a lot, because we perform these tasks frequently, when we're driving, it becomes automatic. So without thinking, we're hitting the brake, turning the corner, and hitting the directional, and turning down the music all at the same time while we're talking to somebody who's sitting in the seat beside us. But it took us a while to get to that point.
Exactly.
And that's basically what you're saying.
Right.
It's the exercise and, yeah, okay.
And we have to get from that temporary muscle memory to the permanent muscle memory. Depending on the individual, permanent muscle memory comes in between 300 and 3,000 to 5,000 repetitions.
That's a lot of practicing.
Right. A lot of practicing, minimum of once a month. Get out there, do it consistently. If you forget how to do it, come back and learn it. But you got to do it the same way every time, over and over again, at least minimum once a month. Even more is better.
Yep.
To build that permanent muscle memory that doesn't deteriorate like the temporary.
So practice, and you're only going to practice a lot if you love your firearm. And if it's a firearm that you don't care for that somebody gave to you, you're not going to practice as much.
Right.
So, but we need to get that going, get practicing and getting people out there shooting their firearms.
Well, we have a whole curriculum too that also, in addition to practicing, we'll build on that as well. We go through several layers of skill builders. We go into tactical. That piece by piece builds that. And what will happen is you'll find it'll get to the point where you're doing it without really being mentally engaged in the physical actions that happen. And I think the best example I read of that was from a book I was reading by Jim Cirillo. Jim Cirillo was a member of the stakeout squad in New York City when they had that, and was involved in probably 250 armed confrontations. And he said it would get to the point where he would go into a confrontation and would wonder who's shooting his gun. He's kind of watching as a bystander, and that's because all of that was built up, and where he had those neural networks built up that he could just react and take care of what he needed to take care of. That's where you can get with your training. Again, repetition, proper training, and tons of practice.
And we're going to be talking more about that in future episodes.
Yes.
And getting into some details. But right now we're going to be looking into going to break. But when we come back from break, we're going to be talking about our Second Amendment watch. And that's something that we're going to be making sure that the newest and the newest news, it's coming up. And there's a lot of proposed legislation that in the state of Florida for the year 2020 that is not looking good for us as gun owners. So stay tuned after this break, and we will be talking about our Second Amendment watch and what you need to be doing.
You're listening to Space Coast Podcast, home of the greatest podcasts on the Space Coast. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor or having your own show, email us at spacecoastpodcast@hotmail.com.
Space Coast Podcast.
Talk hard!
All right. This is Doug Monda.
This is Karen Monda.
And Chris Hadaway.
And we're the host of Survive, the new podcast brought to you by the Survive First Foundation, a nonprofit organization assisting first responders and their families in need of mental health support due to the lifestyle of being a first responder. So, Chris, tell us what we're going to have.
We're coming to you from retired and active law enforcement officers as well as their spouses to discuss the responder life.
Don't forget, this is an unedited and raw podcast, so we need your interactive suggestions and advice to help us help others.
So find us live on our Survive First Facebook page and join in the conversation, or find us on demand on Spotify, iTunes, or anywhere you listen to podcasts from the Space Coast Podcast Network to you.
Hey, make sure you check out Space Cowboy Justice with your hosts, Blake Stewart and Paul Daly. We're going to be talking about interesting legal issues in the entertainment industry and everything geek. If you're into Star Wars, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings, comic books, we're talking about it. Coming at you from the Space Coast Podcast Studios.
Hi there, welcome back. And we, just as I promised, we're going to be talking about our Second Amendment watch here in Florida. And I want to bring to your attention something that's coming up here next. It's a week from Monday, January 6th. And January 6th at 7 p.m., there's actually going to be a Second Amendment forum. And we need to get active. This forum is taking place at the Space Coast Convention Center in Cocoa on 520. It's at 7 p.m. And I'm thinking that there's enough interest in this that you may want to actually be showing up a little bit early in order to get a seat. But Sheriff Wayne Ivey, a gentleman from the Liberty Caucus, a couple of local radio celebrities are going to be there, and they're all going to be talking about things that we need to do in order to begin a resurgence of a little bit of a pushback, because I think we've sat back a really long time, and it's time that, you know, and I liken it to, we're conservatives, okay? So conservative people do what? They just kind of chill and they hang back. Well, all the while, our gun rights have been stomped on. Our Second Amendment has been attacked and is slowly being just kind of shriveling away. They're taking little pieces. It's death by 1,000 bites. And this is really happening. And for those of us in Florida who used to call this the gunshine state, it's no longer the case. A lot of the Parkland legislation that went through a little over a year ago really put a clamp on what we can do as firearm owners. And I think a lot of people don't realize it, because if you're not living it, like in a gun store, you don't really see it. I have seen personally myself people who have applied for the background check, and it's actually been delayed for up to 6 months. And this has happened several times. And it's not delayed for 6 months because there's something bad out there, because after 6 months, they got approved. We have Florida residents who don't have a problem with their background check, but they're being denied the purchase of a firearm for up to 6 months. Now, before, the rest of the country, and still to this day, the rest of the country, has 3 days to perform. So you can't delay it. If you're not sure when they're doing the background check, and if they're not sure for whatever reason, and in this day and age with the technology that's out there, there shouldn't be a we're not sure. You either can or cannot own a firearm.
Well, that ties into the extra layer we have in Florida, too, in background checks.
It does. And a lot of folks don't realize it, that in Florida, and I know this seemed really innocent when it passed, and it passed way before this was in place, way before we opened our gun store 5 years ago. But they're actually, our background check does not go to the NICS system, okay?
The federal background
check.
The
federal background check. Actually, Floridians have to go through the FDLE. So there is a filter, and this filter will either allow the information to go to the NICS background check system, the national system, or they stop it right there in Florida, and you're never getting you don't get due process. So from the NICS system, the national system, you actually have due process. So if you're in a situation where you're denied the ability to purchase a firearm, there's actually checks and balances, how you can appeal it, how you can say, wait a minute, I think that somebody else has the same name I do. But when you're in this new decision pending status that came about when Parkland legislation passed, this takes away any of your due process rights. And you are sitting there, there's no way for you to check into it. There's no way for you to follow up. There's no way for you to say, hey, let me offer some information. Let me help clarify, because there's actually nothing there at this time. It's waiting for the people in the room. And actually, I talked to these guys one time at the FDLE. I said, what's going on? He said, well, there are only 5 people checking all these decision pendings. I said, well, then why are you doing decision pending? Yeah. So why are you doing decision pendings? Why aren't you going straight to the NICS system, and let's let the same system that approves or disapproves firearm ownership for the rest of the country, let's get that here.
And that's Florida only. Even the
Florida only.
toughest gun laws like in New York, New Jersey, and all of them do not have this layer that we have in Florida.
I don't know if they do or not. I can't speak for those states, but I know that the majority of states go straight to the NICS system. So it's just kind of nuts. But people, if you don't realize it, those walls are slowly coming in. It's death by 1,000 bites until, I've never had a problem. I do my 3-day wait or whatever. Oh, and that's another thing. That's a Florida thing. Federal, you don't have to wait 3 days. So it's a 3-day wait in I think it's Brevard County. To be honest with you,
it varies from place to place.
It does. Each county can set their own waiting period. It's kind of like a cool off period or what have you. So anyway, I kind of got a little bit off a track, but just want to let you know that we're going to be doing a Second Amendment watch, and it's going to be keeping you posted on what's going on and what you need to do to be active. And we've got to be active, folks. We can't just sit back here, be complacent, and say, "Oh, that'll never happen. Nobody will ever attack the Second Amendment." Well, it's under attack. It is slowly being chipped away, and we need to do something to stop. And I think that you need to attend this forum, January 6th at the Space Coast Convention Center, and it's at 7 o'clock. And you can go to our Facebook page, Ladies Gun Show, and I will actually have an invitation up there so that you can follow it and get all the details that you need. But right now, Richard has some pending legislation in Florida.
Oh, yeah, just an overall of what we're doing
and
in Florida.
It's scary as anything, people. It's time. If there's ever a time to stand up and start pushing back, now's the time, because this legislation that's being proposed is pretty darn frightening, and it's just not going in a good way. So tell me what you've got so far.
Yeah, as of the other day, which I'm sure it hasn't changed much since, we had 33 proposed bills that were being looked at involving guns, involving firearms use, ownership, and where you can use it and not. Mm-hmm. Of those 33 bills, only 4 of them were pro-gun in any way whatsoever. The remaining 29 were ways to further constrict your abilities to own a firearm, what kind of firearms you can own, what type of capacity your magazines can have. Everything that you hear of coming out of all these other states and thinking, oh, well, that's California or whatever, it's coming. It's here. It's being proposed. So,
one of them I saw, it's actually you have to have a background check for ammunition.
Right. So that's one.
That's Florida, folks.
That's coming. One of the things that we need to look at also, which I found really interesting, and I hope some of our politicians are listening on this, all 4 of the pro-gun bills that came out of the House. None came out of the Senate. Now, when you look at the other side, the other 29, it's a mix of House and Senate. So, and here's another part of it, that it's not just being originated in the Senate. What's originated in the House needs a companion bill in the Senate in order for it to go anywhere. All 4 pro-gun bills in the House do not have a companion bill in the Senate. However, every single one of the 29 anti-gun, gun control bills that came out of both the Senate and the House have companion bills. They can move forward. They can actually have something done. So right now we're sitting on 4 bills that can't go anywhere really because there's no companion bill in the Senate, and we see nothing coming out of the Senate that's pro-gun, that's putting companion bills, that's originating bills, while we're looking at 29 partnered up bills sitting there to take your rights away. So I'm hoping we have some politicians listening. I'm hoping there are people getting in touch with them, because we really need not only the support, but we need some proactive actions happening on the part of our senators, because it's not happening right now, and that's what's going to kill us.
And, if we don't have these politicians listening, this is where we get up and we write a letter, we make a phone call. Because let me tell you, the people who are trying to take away our Second Amendment rights, those people are active. Those people are organized. So if you have a politician sitting in their office and every single day there's one person in there going, I want more gun laws. I want more gun laws. I want more gun laws. Well, doggone it, that's what they're going to do, because that's what they feel is the majority of the push. The rest of us, being conservatives, are sitting back and conservatively thinking, well, they're a Republican politician and they're going to vote to protect the Constitution. Well, they're voting for what they believe the people want. And if we're not communicating what we want, and we're not communicating directly and taking the time and taking the energy to reach out to these people so that they know this is what we want, this is what we don't want, okay? And that's where we need to get active. People, we've got to start getting active. We cannot sit back any longer, because just like Parkland, it's going to come through and everybody's going to be, what the heck just happened? We have a say. This is our state. This is our governing body. We are the constituents, and if we're sitting quiet, silence is acceptance. Don't forget that. If you're sitting back and they don't hear anything from you, then they're going to think that you're just fine with more gun laws.
Yeah, and when you hear it, California, New Jersey, Virginia, all these places, and you think, well, that's California. That won't happen here. They can't do that. We won't allow that. It's already being proposed. It's already here. In California, you need a background check to buy ammo, and guess what? Nobody can buy ammo because the system's all backed up. There are cases of police officers being denied purchases of ammo because the background system's backed up. If we've got 5 people working on the FDLE side here, how fast do you think that's going to back up when we get it here as well? Plus, needing a permission to buy ammunition goes way beyond anything that can be remotely constitutional.
No, that's gun control. So, hey, I'm going to let this little bill slide in underneath the radar. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if we've got guns because they couldn't take our guns away, well, now they've got our ammo. So we don't need this. We don't need more hurdles in order to exercise our Second Amendment right. And not being able to buy ammunition for our guns is a great way to kind of like close that valve and cut off gun owners. So you think that this difficult process of background checks for ammunition, if that just goes on for a couple of years, that's slowly going to dwindle down the number of people who have ammunition in their garage or wherever it is. And slowly but surely, we've got useless guns, which are basically paperweights and the equivalent of a baseball bat. So all these little guns, we cannot allow them to have any small wins, no small victories.
And a lot of it also is behind the scenes. You have your stuff that's up front being proposed, people are talking about, but there's also a lot happening in the shadows that restrict firearms ownerships and rights that we don't see. Perfect example, and it doesn't exist now, and I'm very happy for that, but under a previous administration, there was legislation put in place that added extra strain and stress and restrictions on any banks that would deal with a gun store, so that if a bank dealt with a gun store, they'd be focused 5 times the amount of audits. They'd have restrictions on the business they could do. So they backed off. Same thing with credit card companies. There are credit card companies that won't touch a gun store simply because you're a gun store and there's legislation that makes it hard for them. This is all stuff that happens behind the scenes that nobody sees, but it's happening more and more. And
I'll tell you, I don't think that it's any legislation behind that makes it hard for them. They're making a stance and they're saying, you know what, we're not going to promote firearm sales. We're not going to, promote gun stores. I mean, a perfect example is American Express. We don't accept American Express at our store. Why don't we? Because they have this great little program called Small Business Saturday, and it's the day after Black Friday, and they promote all the small businesses that, it's just kind of a great thing for small businesses, right? Well, I tried being a small business. I tried to apply for it, and they said, oh, you're a gun store. And if you look at, paragraph so-and-so, section whatever, this doesn't apply to gun stores. Why in the world would it not apply to a gun store? Why would they have that prohibition in there? So in exchange, I return the favor, and I will not accept American Express as a way to purchase at my gun store. But that stuff's still out there, and I think a lot of it is more voluntary than anything else. Maybe there are incentives somewhere that prohibit them, or that make it worth their while to prohibit working with the gun stores. So again, that's just kind of an off rant, but there's a lot of stuff. It goes really deep, but on the surface, the stuff that people are going to be feeling right from the beginning, John Q. gun owner, this stuff is coming, and it's already on the books. You guys, you need to look for it. We'll actually have a link on our, we have a website, ladiesgunstore.com, and we're going to have a link on that so you can check out what the proposed legislation is for 2020, what's sitting out there, what does not have a companion bill, and you can educate yourself and follow this stuff, but you really need to get your keyboard out. You need to start sending some emails and making some phone calls.
And in addition, even though it's not here, it could come here, keep an eye on Virginia. I have people coming in the store who don't even know what's going on up there, who never heard that there was a problem up there. But let me tell you, whatever works there, both pro and con, is what's going to be hit in every part of the country because they're pushing it to the limit, to the extreme, both pro and anti-gun there.
It's a test case.
It is.
I really think that the people who are trying to take our guns are testing it out. Virginia is the testing ground, and
exactly.
Whatever happens there, and I do believe that that's going to be ground zero for whatever.
Oh yeah, they're proposing the most strict gun laws going, driven by millions of dollars out of Bloomberg. That's no secret. It's a fact. And what they're doing is trying to get the most restrictive gun laws in the country in place there, and the people are pushing back. And the way they're pushing back is you've had all the county sheriff's department declaring their county's Second Amendment sanctuaries, which is awesome. Out of about 150, there's over 105 last I looked that were Second Amendment sanctuaries. But then you have the governor pushing back the other way, saying, well, if you think you're a sanctuary and your sheriff's department's not going to enforce these laws, we're going to call in the National Guard on you. The National Guard will enforce the laws and will defund the sheriff's department.
That's martial law.
That's martial law. You cannot bring the military against your own citizens. And then you've got some of the politicians going way off the deep end, talking about nuking their people and everything. It's just a mess right now, and it's coming to an extreme. And watch what's going to happen, especially January 20th. There's an armed protest that's going to happen at the Richmond at the Capitol building. People are coming from all over, including Florida, to attend that.
It's so important. I mean, this is not just Virginia's problem. We need to reach out to them. We need to support them, because if it ever comes to us, we're certainly going to want to have some sort of help or some sort of support from the rest of our country as well. Sorry I interrupted you.
No,
go ahead. So you got the armed...
Yeah, you've got the armed protest going there, and in the meantime,
January
they've got a
20th.
bill in there that's going to try to make the Capitol a no-gun zone, a gun-free zone. So you got all these people from all over the East United States, probably further, heading to Richmond for an armed protest, and the other side saying you can't bring guns here, we're going to arrest you, and threatening the National Guard. Keep an eye on it, whatever happens there.
That's
it's
a powder
be a
keg.
model. Yes.
That's a powder keg. And right now what it is it's the sheriffs who are standing between their people and the state government.
Right.
And we really need to, we are so fortunate to have Sheriff Wayne Ivey,
absolutely,
who is basically building the wall, a wall and protecting us. So I certainly support Sheriff Ivey. I look forward to hearing what he's got to say on January 6th. And see, but I support him in everything that he does. And we're so fortunate to have Sheriff Ivey that I really believe that he's going to keep at least Brevard County safe.
So what do people need to do next?
First
right.
podcast, sorry.
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
Keep an eye on our website. Keep an eye on our Facebook. We're going to have a blog coming up soon. We're going to be discussing issues there. And come into the store if you want to discuss any of it further, because there's a whole lot more than what we even touched upon here. And future podcasts, we're going to do one every other week. And it's going to be out on our Facebook. It's going to be on Space Coast Podcast, iHeartRadio, all over the place. Keep in touch with that because we're going to touch on both the political situation, training stuff. I'll try not to get as deep into the biology and psychology and get into more practical stuff that you can use out of the gate, as well as things that are happening in the firearms world in Florida as well and what we got going on at the store. So every other week, 11 o'clock, same place.
ladiesgunshow.com, exploring the world of firearm ownership. Thank you, Richard.